Russia declares 2.4 million square kilometers of international ocean off-limits to U.S. warships. 14 American vessels cross the line in 6 hours. Putin's response: complete silence. November Fear 2025. 4:47 a.m. Moscow time. The Russian Ministry of Defense issues Emergency Decree 847Z. 7 so-called security zones spanning the Black Sea, Baltic Sea, and North Pacific. Each zone extending 200 nautical miles from Russian territorial waters. Total area 2.4 million square kilometers, larger than Libya. The decree carries a threat. Any foreign military vessel entering these zones faces immediate interdiction. Putin calls it a defensive necessity. The rest of the world calls it what it is: an illegal power grab over international waters. The timing wasn't accidental. Russia had just completed its largest naval exercise in 3 decades. Operation Ocean Shield 2025. 55 warships deployed across 3 fleets. Northern Fleet sent 17 vessels, including the Admiral Gorshkov frigate armed with Zircon hypersonic missiles. Pacific Fleet contributed 21 ships led by the Varyag missile cruiser. Black Sea Fleet added another 17, including 6 km² submarines. This wasn't a drill. This was a show of force designed to intimidate. Russian state media broadcast footage of missiles launching, submarines diving, fighter jets screaming overhead. The message was clear: these waters belong to Russia now. Admiral Konstantin Vershinin held a press conference in Moscow, standing in full dress uniform beneath Russian naval flags. His statement lasted 4 minutes, every word calculated, every pause deliberate. Russia has established defensive security perimeters, he announced. Any nation violating these zones will face consequences proportional to the threat. He didn't specify what proportional meant. He didn't need to. The implied threat hung in the air like smoke. Western vessels should avoid these areas for their own safety, he continued. Russia cannot guarantee the security of ships that ignore this warning. Translation: stay out or face the music. China issued a statement of support within 2 hours. Venezuela followed 30 minutes later. Iran chimed in before lunch. A coordinated diplomatic offensive designed to legitimize Russia's claim. International law experts immediately cried foul. The United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea is crystal clear. Freedom of navigation in international waters is sacrosanct. Russia can't just draw lines on a map and call it sovereignty. But legal arguments don't stop warships, and Russia had 55 of them positioned across its new security zones. What's your weapon of choice? Type A for submarines, Type B for destroyers. The Pentagon's response came faster than anyone expected. 53 minutes after Russia's decree went public. Defense Secretary Martinez stood in the briefing room. No prepared statement, no diplomatic hedging, just 5 words that changed everything. The United States does not comply. Short, blunt, unmistakable. He elaborated for exactly 90 seconds. International waters remain international. Freedom of navigation is non-negotiable. U.S. naval forces will continue all scheduled operations without deviation. Then he walked off stage. No questions, no debate. Done. At 11:22 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, Compact FLT issued Operation Order 2025-083. The Pacific Fleet was already in motion. USS Ronald Reagan Carrier Strike Group was conducting exercises 340 miles east of Vladivostok, technically outside Russia's newly declared zone. Technically, the order was simple: execute a freedom of navigation transit through the contested waters. Timeline: immediate. Rules of engagement: standard peacetime protocols with weapons tight unless fired upon. The Reagan Group consisted of the carrier itself, 2 Arleigh Burke-class destroyers, one Ticonderoga-class cruiser, and one Virginia-class submarine running silent below. 5 vessels, combined displacement 147,000 tons, combined firepower enough to level a small country. Simultaneously, the 6th Fleet in the Mediterranean received identical orders. USS George H.W. Bush Carrier Strike Group was operating in the eastern Medi. Distance to Russia's Black Sea Security Zone, 180 nautical miles. The Bush Group included the carrier, 3 destroyers, 1 cruiser, and supporting vessels. They turned northeast at 14:08 GMT. Course plotted directly through the heart of Russia's declared exclusion area. In the Baltic, things got even more interesting. 4 U.S. Navy destroyers were participating in Baltic Operations 2025, joint exercises with Polish and Lithuanian naval forces. The destroyers USS Porter, USS James E. Williams, USS Oscar Austin, and USS Stout. Russia's security zone in the Baltic covered 420,000 square kilometers. A massive swath of international waters suddenly declared off-limits. The 4 destroyers received their orders at 15:33 Central European Time. Plot course through the contested zone. Maintain normal operational speed. Activate all radar and communication systems. Make this visible. Make this loud. The first crossing happened at 17:47 GMT. USS Ronald Reagan Strike Group entered Russia's Pacific Security Zone at bearing 285 degrees. Speed, 22 knots. The carrier's air wing launched routine combat air patrols. 8 FA-18 Super Hornets climbed to 25,000 feet. Not aggressive, not provocative, just standard carrier operations in international waters. Russian long-range reconnaissance aircraft scrambled from Yelizovo Air Base. 2 Tu-142 Bear Maritime Patrol aircraft intercepted the Reagan Group within 30 minutes. They circled at a distance of 12 nautical miles, close enough to observe, far enough to avoid incident. The Bears transmitted on guard frequency. You are operating in restricted Russian security waters. Alter course immediately. The Reagan's air boss responded with textbook professionalism. This is U.S. Navy aircraft conducting lawful operations in international airspace. We will maintain present course and speed. 18 minutes later, USS George H.W. Bush crossed into the Black Sea Security Zone. The response was different here, more aggressive. 6 Russian Su-30SM fighters launched from Saki Air Base in Crimea. They formed a combat air patrol pattern directly in the Bush Group's path. But they stayed in Russian airspace, technically legal, definitely intimidating. The Bush maintained course. Her Aegis radar systems tracked every Russian aircraft within 200 miles. The cruiser USS Leyte Gulf had her vertical launch cells ready, 96 missiles poised for launch, SM-2 air defense missiles, SM-3 ballistic missile interceptors, Tomahawk cruise missiles. None of them needed, but all of them ready. The Baltic crossing at 18:15 GMT was the boldest move. All 4 destroyers entered the security zone in formation, 2-mile spacing between vessels. Their AN/SPY-1D radar systems lit up the entire Baltic Sea. Active sensor sweeps that announced their presence to every military in the region. Russian corvettes from the Baltic Fleet scrambled to intercept. The Starogushchi-class corvette Subrazitelny and Gremyashchi raced south from Baltiysk. Speed, 26 knots. They positioned themselves 3 nautical miles ahead of the American formation. A blocking maneuver. Aggressive, but not hostile. The U.S. destroyers didn't blink. They maintained course, maintained speed. The Russian corvettes eventually broke off, unable or unwilling to force a confrontation. What would you have done when Russian fighters started circling your carrier group? Comment your answer below. By 1930 GMT, all 14 U.S. warships had completed their transits through Russia's security zones. Not a single shot fired, not a single threat materialized. The freedom of navigation operation was textbook perfect, clinical execution of international law. But the strategic implications were seismic. Russia's response was deafening silence. No official statement from the Ministry of Defense, no press conference from Admiral Vershinin, no angry rhetoric from state media. Nothing. The 55 Russian warships that were supposed to enforce these security zones? They watched from a distance. The submarines that were going to interdict violators? They stayed deep and quiet. The fighter jets that promised consequences? They circled and returned to base. The international community noticed immediately. Japan issued a statement praising U.S. commitment to freedom of navigation. South Korea followed within the hour. Australia, Philippines, Vietnam, and Indonesia issued a joint declaration supporting the operation. Even Germany and France offered diplomatic backing. The message rippled across every contested waterway on Earth. China's claims in the South China Sea, Iran's threats in the Strait of Hormuz, Russia's aggression in the Arctic, all undermined by 14 American warships that simply refused to be intimidated. The tactical details reveal why Russia backed down. Start with detection capability. The E-2D Advanced Hawkeye early warning aircraft flying from USS Ronald Reagan could track every surface vessel and aircraft within 340 nautical miles. That's an area of 363,000 square nautical miles under constant surveillance. The carrier's cooperative engagement capability allowed it to share targeting data in real time with every ship in the strike group. One radar picture, one targeting solution, distributed across multiple platforms. The Arleigh-Burke destroyers brought their own revolution. Each destroyer carries the AN/SPI-6 air and missile defense radar, 30 times more sensitive than previous generation systems. It can track a baseball-sized object at ranges exceeding 200 miles. Against aircraft and missiles, the detection range extends beyond 300 miles. The destroyer's vertical launch cells held a combined 384 missiles, SM-2 for aircraft, SM-6 for ballistic missile defense and anti-ship warfare, Tomahawks for land attack. A single destroyer could engage 12 targets simultaneously. The 4 Baltic destroyers combined, 48 simultaneous engagements. The Ticonderoga cruisers added another dimension. USS Lady Gulf operates the Aegis Baseline 9 combat system, the most advanced naval air defense platform ever built. It can coordinate defensive operations across an entire carrier strike group, manage 300 tracks simultaneously, engage threats at ranges exceeding 250 miles. The cruiser's SPY-1D radar rotates at 6 revolutions per minute. Each rotation paints every aircraft within radar range. No gaps, no blind spots. Total situational awareness. Below the surface, Virginia-class submarines rewrote the rules. These boats displace 7,800 tons submerged. Length, 377 feet. Speed, classified but exceeding 25 knots underwater. Diving depth, greater than 800 feet. They carry 12 Tomahawk cruise missiles in vertical launch tubes, 4 torpedo tubes for Mk-48 ADCAP torpedoes. Each torpedo, 650 pounds of high explosive. Wire-guided. Maximum range, 38 miles at 55 knots. A single Virginia-class submarine could devastate Russia's Baltic fleet without surfacing. Russian anti-submarine warfare capabilities couldn't detect them, couldn't track them, couldn't stop them. The cost differential was staggering. USS Ronald Reagan, $6.2 billion. Each Arleigh-Burke destroyer, $1.8 billion. The Ticonderoga cruiser, $1.2 billion. Virginia-class submarine, $3.4 billion. Total cost of just the Reagan strike group, approximately $16.8 billion. That's the gross domestic product of Moldova, floating across the Pacific, untouchable. Russia's fleet couldn't compete on technology or training. The Admiral Gorshkov frigate represents their most modern surface combatant. Displacement, 5,400 tons. A third the size of an Arleigh Burke. It carries 16 Onyx anti-ship missiles and Parliament Redut air defense system. Impressive on paper, limited in practice. The Parliament Redut has an effective range of 93 miles. The American SM-6 reaches 250 miles. Russian ships would be under fire long before they could shoot back. The Kilo-class submarines were Russia's ace in the hole. Diesel-electric boats renowned for quiet operations. But quiet doesn't mean invisible. U.S. Navy P-8A Poseidon aircraft patrolled overhead, dropping sonobuoys in predetermined patterns. Each sonobuoy broadcasts acoustic data back to the aircraft. The Poseidon's onboard systems process returns from dozens of buoys simultaneously. Modern signal processing can detect a kilo at ranges exceeding 50 nautical miles. Once detected, once tracked, a submarine loses its primary advantage: stealth. Support the channel by giving this video a thumbs up if you found it valuable. The strategic implications extended far beyond 6 hours in March. China watched every second of this operation. Their claims in the South China Sea rest on similar logic to Russia's security zones. Declare sovereignty, deploy forces, dare others to challenge. The U.S. Navy just demonstrated that strategy fails against credible opposition. The People's Liberation Army Navy operates approximately 370 ships, larger than the U.S. Navy by hull count. But technology and training matter more than numbers. China's newest Type 055 destroyer is formidable, yet it still uses systems analogous to America's technology from 15 years ago. The gap in sensor capability, missile range, and network integration remains vast. Iran took notes. The Strait of Hormuz represents 20% of global oil traffic. Iran periodically threatens to close the strait, harass tankers, intimidate shipping. Russia just proved that maritime intimidation fails against determined opposition. The U.S. Navy operates continuously in the Persian Gulf. Fifth Fleet maintains permanent presence. Iran's fast attack craft and midget submarines represent asymmetric threats, dangerous in confined waters. But the U.S. response would be overwhelming. Carrier aviation, cruise missiles, precision strikes. Iran saw what happened when Russia tried to restrict international waters. The lesson was clear. North Korea also watched. The Sea of Japan lies adjacent to Russia's Pacific Security Zone. North Korean naval provocations typically involve submarine incursions and maritime border violations. The U.S. Navy transit through Russia's zone sent a message: international law will be enforced. Freedom of navigation is non-negotiable. No nation, regardless of nuclear arsenal or military posture, can unilaterally restrict international waters. The economic dimension mattered too. Global shipping depends on predictable maritime law. Approximately 90% of world trade travels by sea. If nations could arbitrarily declare security zones over international waters, global commerce collapses. Insurance rates skyrocket. Shipping routes become unpredictable. Supply chains fracture. Russia's decree threatened the entire framework of international maritime trade. The U.S. Navy's response protected not just American interests, but the global economic order. The operation's execution revealed American advantages beyond technology. Every ship involved had conducted freedom of navigation operations before. The procedures are standard. The training is continuous. U.S. Navy surface warfare officers practice these scenarios monthly. The air wings drill intercept procedures weekly. The submarine force runs silent transits constantly. This wasn't a special operation requiring months of preparation. This was Tuesday for the US Navy. Russian forces, by contrast, rarely conduct operations at this intensity. Their naval exercises are scripted events with predetermined outcomes. Combat air patrols follow rigid patterns. Anti-submarine warfare training uses preset locations. When confronted with unpredictable American responses, Russian commanders hesitated. That hesitation was fatal to their deterrent. You can't enforce a security zone if you're afraid to confront violators. Was this outcome a strategic masterstroke or a dangerous escalation? Leave your thoughts in the comments. The diplomatic aftermath unfolded predictably. Russia's foreign ministry issued a statement 3 days later. It complained about American provocation and reckless behavior. It warned of unspecified consequences for future violations, but it didn't repeat the security zone claim. The decree remained technically active, but enforcement? None. Russia's naval forces returned to normal patrol patterns. The submarines went back to port. The surface combatants resumed routine operations. Putin's grand declaration became an embarrassing footnote. NATO allies coordinated follow-on operations. British Royal Navy destroyer HMS Defender conducted a similar transit through the Black Sea Zone on March 22nd. French frigate Auvergne crossed the Mediterranean approach on March 25th. German Navy corvette Braunschweig operated in the Baltic Zone on March 28th. Each transit reinforced the same principle. International waters remain international. Allied nations will operate wherever international law permits. Russia cannot dictate terms through intimidation. The long-term consequences are still unfolding. Russia's attempt to restrict international waters failed publicly, spectacularly. That failure damages deterrence across all domains. If Russia can't enforce maritime restrictions with 55 warships deployed, what else can't it enforce? Its air defense zones, its territorial claims, its red lines. Every failed threat weakens the next threat. Every bluff called emboldens opposition. This kind of detailed tactical breakdown takes hours to research. Subscribe to help us keep making them. Putin's gambit revealed a fundamental truth about naval power. Presence requires capability. Capability requires technology, training, and resources. Russia deployed impressive hull numbers. But hulls alone don't control oceans. Sensors matter. Weapons matter. Networks matter. Training matters. The US Navy dominated all 4 categories. Russian admirals knew it. American commanders knew it. Most importantly, the world knew it. The 14 American warships that crossed Russia's security zones weren't making a political statement. They were enforcing international law, protecting freedom of navigation, defending principles enshrined in treaties signed by 168 nations, including Russia. The fact that enforcement required carrier strike groups and guided missile destroyers reveals how far some nations will go to challenge order. The fact that enforcement succeeded without firing a shot reveals who holds the advantage. Future confrontations are inevitable. China will push boundaries in the Pacific. Iran will threaten shipping in the Middle East. Russia will probe defenses in the Arctic. Each challenge will test American resolve. Each test will require responses similar to March 15th. Presence, professionalism, overwhelming capability. The security zone's crisis established a template. When adversaries attempt to rewrite maritime law through force, the response must be immediate, visible, and uncompromising. 14 warships, 6 hours, 2.4 million square kilometers of contested ocean, 0 shots fired. Russia's entire strategy collapsed because America refused to blink. That's not luck, That's not coincidence. That's the result of 70 years of naval investment, continuous modernization, relentless training, global presence, the capacity to project power anywhere, anytime, against any opponent. The ocean doesn't belong to any single nation. It belongs to all nations operating under agreed rules. Those rules protect commerce, ensure security, and prevent chaos. When those rules face challenge, they require defense, not through words, not through diplomacy alone, through steel hulls cutting through contested waters at 22 knots, through radar systems that track threats 300 miles away, through missiles ready to launch in seconds, through submariners operating in crushing darkness thousands of feet below. Putin declared security zones expecting compliance. He got defiance instead. He deployed 55 warships expecting intimidation. He got irrelevance instead. He threatened consequences expecting hesitation. He got contempt instead. The gap between Russia's ambitions and its capabilities has never been more obvious. The gap between America's principles and its power has never been more aligned. Your engagement directly shapes what we cover next. Drop a comment and subscribe. Freedom of navigation isn't just a legal concept. It's a commitment that requires constant vigilance, constant presence, constant readiness. When that commitment faces testing, the response defines everything that follows. 14 American warships provided that definition on March 15, 2025. They drew a line that adversaries cannot cross without consequences. They defended an order that benefits every nation on Earth. They reminded the world that maritime law survives not because everyone agrees with it, but because some nations possess the power and will to enforce it. So, what happens next time Russia tries this? Next time China draws illegal boundaries? Next time Iran threatens closure? The answer sailed through 2.4 million square kilometers in 6 hours. The answer carried 384 vertical launch cells ready to fire. The answer operated radar systems seeing 300 miles in every direction. The answer won't change. International waters remain international. Freedom of navigation remains non-negotiable. And America's Navy remains ready to enforce both principles anywhere on Earth. If you made it this far, you're the core of our community. Like, subscribe, and hit that bell. Which naval platform do you think is most critical for maintaining freedom of navigation? Drop your answer below. Should NATO conduct joint freedom of navigation operations more frequently? Let us know in the comments.